Hi, my name is Sydney, and today I am going to talk about my favorite books of all time. These can be the best books that I've ever read, or also some guilty pleasures that I really enjoy reading. Literature has been a huge part of my life, so I thought, why not share some of my favorite books, and maybe, you know, it's quarantine, maybe I'll inspire you to go read something. Maybe a book that I love is one you'll absolutely hate, and I think that's so cool because reading is subjective, and I think a lot of times people forget that. Everyone has a different response to a story, and I think that's what I love most about literature, is that everyone has a different response. So again, even when I post a later video that I'm thinking of doing of the worst books I've read, those are books that other people might have really enjoyed. So it's completely subjective. Everything I'm about to say today should be taken with a grain of salt. Let's get into it. What is that? So the first book that I'm going to talk about is called The Book Thief. Now, this is a book that I read for school. It was actually one of the first books, not the first, but one of the first books in high school that I read that I really had a connection to. It was the first book that I ever really annotated as well. Ooh! That change in lighting. Okay. Anyway, so I didn't like to annotate books because I was always nervous that I would give the book away, and I didn't want my thoughts to change how someone else read the story. Also, I just think it's weird to give a book you've written into the library, and because it was the first one that I annotated and really went page by page and got involved with, I think that's what made me have such a deep love for it and what connected me to the story. Not to mention, we've always grown up with the stories of World War II. My generation, it was in every history class. Every single year we talked about it some way, somehow. So this was a different take on this story, and one that I love. And I love it because of the idea that this is from Death's perspective. So something that is so scary and terrifying, and just something that everyone is dreading, is told in this like comforting way. It's from Death's point of view. That was not really, you know, that was not the greatest way to say it, but you get my point. Even though it is a book for middle school to high school, I do recommend it. I think it's a beautiful read. Now, is it the perfect book for quarantine? Maybe not, unless you want something deep and heavy, but I do think it's a beautiful story. So I'm gonna go through these kind of rapid fire because I have a lot and I didn't realize how many I had. So, and the last time I filmed, it was like an hour long, and you guys don't want to be here that long. Yeah. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Percy Jackson. So this is another one that I love. Like, this is my Harry Potter. So I'm gonna get a lot of comments. I can already picture it. I have not read the Harry Potter series all the way through.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
But I think I've never liked other people telling me I have to read something. Even for school, like The Book Thief was a book that I chose to read. And, you know, so when people tell me I need to read something, I don't like that. And then it disinterests me. So it was really bad. I'm so sorry. I know. I'm getting to it. I'm getting to finishing it. I'm so sorry. But this is my Harry Potter. Now, I don't like to compare the two, and I don't like other people comparing the two, mainly because they are two completely different authors and written in two completely different times. I had to change my lighting situation. This in and of itself is enough to make me go buy a ring light. Wow. Okay. So Anyway, back to Percy Jackson. I love this series. I had a deep connection to it. I read the first book in 5th grade, and it was one of the first books for school that I actually read, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. I enjoyed it so much, I remember finishing it, I think, in about 2 or 3 days, and then I went and I had my mom take me to the store so I could buy the 2nd and 3rd book, which were the only ones out at that time. So I love this series, and to this day it is a series I reread constantly. I really enjoy it. It's a beautiful read in the sense of there's so much good representation, and I think it's really the starting point in young adult novels where we have that representation, and it only gets better from there. So I recommend it. It is a middle grade to high school novel, so a middle grade to high school book series. So just know that going in, it's going to be a little different. It's going to have, it's going to be simplistic and probably a really fast read, but I think they're really entertaining, and during this time, right, why not have that kind of read? So yeah. Okay, so the next book is actually one that I physically have with me right now, and that is I'll Be Gone in the Dark. A lot of my books are actually packed up because I am moving in 2 months, so I've started packing my whole entire room, and about 6 of the boxes are of books, and that's after I've given away a bunch. But anyway, I'll Be Gone in the Dark is the first nonfiction novel that I ever finished. I mean, I have read nonfiction novels for school for research papers, and I couldn't finish them. I really, it's difficult for me to get into a nonfiction. But I think what I loved about I'll Be Gone in the Dark is it's told in a narrative style. So the writing is just beautiful, and it's also, it's a true crime nonfiction novel, which a lot of people might be scared about. A lot of the true crime that I've read or heard or looked at usually tends to tell the story where it's kind of pitying the victims. And I think what I love most about this book is that it makes the victims, it shows how brave they are, and it doesn't look down on them. And that's the best way I can describe it, is it's just a really well-written novel. Not to mention, the woman who was writing this, Michelle McNamara, she passed away in the middle of writing it. Her friend helped finish it, and you can tell when it's Billy Jensen, her friend, who is writing, because he says so, and I appreciate that. And it's all taken from her notes. But what's also really cool is 2 weeks after this novel came out, they actually caught the Golden State Killer, which is who this book is about. And I just think that's so cool, because Michelle McNamara was a person who didn't give up, and she persisted with the PD to just go after this guy. He was traceable. He left so much evidence, but they had just stopped looking into him. So it's really because of her and the detective Paul Holes that he was caught. And I just really, it's a great read. Again, it might be too heavy for quarantine. I get that, but yeah, this is just one I really enjoy and love. Now the next one is Unorthodox. Now I actually physically have the book with me, but it's in my mom's room because she's reading it right now. But it's one that's gotten a lot of hype because the limited series came out, and I'm actually going to do a video comparing the two because I did watch the series and I loved them both, but they're both really different, and I want to talk about that in depth later on. However, Unorthodox was another nonfiction novel that I finished and loved. I just loved it, and it's because the writer, she wrote it right as she was getting out of this Hasidic Jewish community. And I've always been fascinated by other religions, and I think what I love most is that she was able to talk about the religion in a way where she noted what was wrong, but she also still had a deep love for certain aspects of the religion and the culture and the people. And so I don't know, I'm not from the Hasidic Jewish community, but I felt like it was still a graceful story, not to mention her writing style really made you feel like she was just talking to you, and I loved that because her writing was, like, her vernacular was still flowery and she still had some really good symbolism in there, but it also just kind of felt like you were talking to a friend. And I finished that book so fast. I finished it in 2 days. I loved it. So yeah, I will go more into it in the next video. So, Alias Grace. Okay, Alias Grace is by Margaret Atwood. Now, most people know Margaret Atwood for The Handmaid's Tale. I love The Handmaid's Tale. I actually like the sequel, The Testaments, more, which can be another video as well. I could do a lot of videos, guys. Alias Grace is a really good story because it mixes a lot of elements in a really interesting way. It's a mystery, it's a true crime. In a lot of ways, it is true crime because it is based on a real story. It's also a ghost story. There's an M. Night Shyamalan twist at the end, and I just love Margaret Atwood's writing style and how each one of her books is different from the other. I really think it's important for authors to have versatility. A lot of my issues with other books and other book series is I like the author, but it's the same story I get from them every single time. So Alias Grace was just wonderful. I had read Handmaid's Tale first, and so I was kind of expecting that blunt writing style. But with Alias Grace, it was so different. It was a completely different energy and tone, and I loved that. So it's also a limited series on Netflix, and I recommend watching the series. I think the series is just as good as the book because Margaret Atwood had a hand in this series, but also a lot of it is word for word the dialogue of the novel. So yeah, the book's great. Really recommend it. Highly recommend it, actually. Next is Anne of Green Gables. Again, another book that's packed away right now, but that novel, so this is one that a lot of people think I might have read in childhood. A lot of people did read it in childhood. I didn't read it until high school, and this is because I kind of avoided classics for a long time. I really was the kind of person who was like, I just read for fun, not for themes or motifs or to feel a deep impact. Because, you know, some people do that, and that's totally okay. That is okay. You're allowed to have binge-worthy books that you just like can't get enough of because they're so cheesy and all of that. I have tons of those. But Anne of Green Gables was one of those books that I had a deep connection to the character. I love Anne, and I started reading the book because I started watching the TV show Anne with an E on Netflix, which is a beautiful, you need to watch it. It's one of the best TV shows. I think one of my favorite TV shows of all time. And I just think that Anne as a character, she's stunning as a character. She's just someone I think everyone can connect to. And, you know, I'm extroverted and loud, and she's extroverted and loud. I don't have red hair, but I understand Anne a lot. And so I read the entire series. If I'm being honest, I would recommend only the first 3. The next few are not that great. I love them anyway, just as part of the narrative, but if you really want to get into Anne of Green Gables, I say the first 3 are really where you could stop. So yeah, Anne of Green Gables. The next book is The Red Queen, and that's one I actually have right now, right next to me, because I have not packed it up yet. But this book series, I've read a lot of young adult sci-fi fantasy because that was like my main genre in high school. And you know, a lot of them have the same formula, and I'm okay with that. A lot of times, as long as I can feel a connection to the characters and feel like the story and plot are moving along in a way that's, you know, appropriate, and the writing isn't too simplistic, but it doesn't have to be like, you know, Oscar Wilde flowery. The Red Queen was a book series that came out of nowhere to me. It has the same formula in a lot of ways as other young adult fantasies, but there's also something about it that's different, and I think it's just the characters and how deeply I connected to them, and I started to care so much about everyone in this book, and it was one of those series that the first two had come out, but the next two were like on the way, and I read the first two books in about 3 days. I think it was 3 to 4 days. I know it was a very short period of time. It was within a week. And I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. So again, it's a young adult novel. I think young adult novels can actually be really, really well done and have really great stories and also have better representation than a lot of adult fiction. And so yeah, I highly recommend the Red Queen series if you want something fun and exciting and adventurous. I'm not really happy with how it ended, but it's still an amazing story nonetheless, so I highly recommend that. So these are now going to be more of my like guilty pleasure reads. The next is Renegades. So Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I loved this book. I keep saying that with everyone, but I really did. This book was so fun. It was so new to me. It's a story about superheroes and villains, and it's really about how everyone is a little bit bad and everyone is a little bit good. And the writing itself isn't insanely beautiful, or the vernacular isn't extensive, and just what really is good about this book is the characters. The characters are so well thought out. I felt like I could see them and I could touch them and I knew them, and I was rooting for bad guys and disliking good guys, and it was just crazy. And I think that the story itself is so different. It's not like anything I've read in the young adult fantasy section, and I really appreciate that, and I loved it. I really did. It's a guilty pleasure. It's really simple. I'm sure you could read it really fast, even though they're pretty thick books. But yeah, it's one I'm gonna reread a million times. It's so fun, especially now during quarantine. I think it's one that everyone would enjoy. So yeah, that's that. Also, it's one I'm really hoping there's a spin-off series for because of the epilogue. And if you've read the book or if you know the series, then you know what I'm talking about. That epilogue was just fantastic. Oh my god, enough said. Okay. The next book is a cheesy young adult romance called Fangirl. So this book it's by Rainbow Rowell, and it's not a classic read or whatever, but it is one that is so cute, and it is just one. I have read a lot of young adult romance, so much, that's so bad that I have skimmed and I have put down and I did not finish because it was just so bad, and there were lines where you physically cringe and you're like, oh my god. But this book was so cute, and I think it's because I personally connected with the lead character. I think, again, the characterization is so well done that you care about her and you care about the relationship that she's getting into. I think a lot with young adult romance is it's more about the romance rather than the characters, if that makes sense. And I think you care more about the romance when you care about the characters. And that's all I'm going to really say. It's really a simplistic story. It's one of my favorites. I love it so much. Give it a read if you're into really cheesy, just want a nice, fun book to read. It's so cute. The next one is called The Big Overeasy. Now, this was one I was shocked that I liked. I picked it up based on the cover, and I was kind of like, I'm just gonna give this to my mom because it's a detective novel, and I don't know why, but I'm not into detective novels. I've never really liked detective novels, but I gave it a chance, and I laughed out loud. I have not laughed physically at a book until this book. I loved it. Oh my god, I keep saying that, but I did. It was so well done. Now, I think it's too because I really like stories that incorporate fairy tales and mythology, because it's just an area that I'm interested in. I really like fairy tales, mythology, different religions, different cultures. I love that kind of stuff. So that is why I really liked this book. It is incorporating fairy tales and the detectives, and it's just, I can't even describe it. It's in its own world, and I wish that it was supposed to be a longer series. There are 2 books. There's The Fourth Bear, which is about Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and of course there's a 4th bear. The Big Overeasy is about Humpty Dumpty, and I wanted there to be more in the series, and I don't know why he stopped writing it, but I'm really kind of upset that there's only 2, because I really think that this could have been a series that I just bought every single one and binged multiple times. So yeah, highly recommend if you want something to laugh at. It's really funny. Okay, so the last book I'm talking about in this video is Ready Player One. Now, Ready Player One is... it was a book I was not expecting. Again, it was a book that someone recommended to me, and I picked it up because I didn't really have anything else interesting me, and it sounded cool. It was way better than I thought it was going to be. Oh my gosh. It was just one of those books where everything was so specific and detailed. You weren't left with many questions. The story ended, and you were fine. You were like, this is a good ending. This is solid, rock solid. And I know there was, again, another movie adaptation of this novel. I actually think that the movie version is pretty decent. I prefer the book, but the movie version is still pretty decent and pretty well done. But again, the book, even though I'm not a gamer, or I wasn't at the time, I have been getting into video games. I'm really bad at them, but I really appreciate and like them. Enough said. But at the time, I didn't know anything about video games, and even not knowing anything about video games, I understood many of the references. I understood the plot points. It was just a really entertaining read, and one of the best like sci-fi novels that I've read. So yeah, alright, so that is it for this video. Those were just some of my favorites. I'm actually planning on doing a part 2 to this video, which I'm gonna film probably right now, but you'll see like way later on because I don't know how to edit yet. But these were just some of my favorites that I wanted to talk about right now. I hope you enjoy them. If you want to recommend books to me, even though I've said I hate people telling me what to read, I still am fascinated by what other people think. And if you've read some of these books and you had a different opinion or you didn't like certain things, I want to hear that too. It is okay to have differing opinions on novels and books. I think that that's the whole point of literature, is to cause a discussion and to impact people differently. So thank you for watching. I hope you finished the video, and I hope that this continues because I have a lot of fun filming this. Even though this is like my 80th time filming this one, I've had a lot of fun doing it. So I really hope you enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye!